Are we good?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Call the Finance Committee to order. Let the record show all members are present and accounted for. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there additions to the agenda? It looks like there are. SA 27 and SA 28, is that correct? So would someone offer a motion to approve the agenda with those additions, please?
Move to approve the agenda with the additions of A27 and A28.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
SA, yes.
Next item before the committee is approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
I've reviewed the minutes, Mr. Chair, and I think they're in order. I would move their approval.
And since you weren't here, I will second those. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. All right, moving on. Legislation before the committee. First item is R7-20. This was before the committee at the last meeting. We asked postponement to get further information, and can we ask Director, or are you Director? I don't know what you are anymore. Right. Right. Manager. And the last time we felt that there needed to be a little more explanation of why we moved from level A10 to a level A13. We got some verbal information from Mr. Snyder. This is for your edification, Sheila, that this is in some sense contingency planning to prepare for that day 43 years from now when he retires, but also because we weren't successful in attracting a person at the A10 level. This is a small operation and everybody there counts. So we asked that we get a little more information, and then
Right.
we'll
And
take.
you should have already received the job description that was before the Civil Service Board, which included all the comments, all of the changes to that document that occurred. It's even attributed to whom. And I sent for your edification the former senior buyer description, so you could see the significant change in duties between the old and the proposed new. As was explained to you in our meeting before, this senior buyer is really shifting in terms of its prior focus. It's becoming more of the second level position, a step down from the procurement officer. So we're really talking about higher level complexity of the work related to the decisions that are now going to be entrusted at the second level. Our goal in doing so was twofold. First, to both capture and reflect the nature of the work, which is primary, and then secondary, to make sure that you're attracting an individual that hopefully in the future will have grown and received some internal knowledge from the procurement officer for succession planning purposes, to understand both municipal purchasing and also to be able to step in and handle the workload that's grown over the years at the higher level buyer responsibilities. So the work that I did was to make sure that I've gone out with the described duties, compared it to other jurisdictions. You know, through the Evergreen study, we had particular jurisdictions that were our comparators, so that's what I concentrate on. And then we have I guess a simple measure is to call it a factor analysis system that Evergreen gave us that we were trained in, HR members were trained in, that has 5 different dimensions that positions are evaluated by. So that was used as well. The pay data that was captured from the other individual agencies that we compare to was utilized. And then you have to make sure you do an internal analysis so that the comparison to other similarly responsible positions in city government is taken into account as well, which was done. And so that's how we got to a grade 13 recommendation. That's how we got to a job description that you have. That's how I got to, along with Brian here to help explain to the Civil Service Board, got through their responsible role in approving the job description for this particular position. And then since that resulted in a grade change, you'll see in the position summary before you that the senior bar, even though there has not been an allocation for that position, based on the job duty changes, that summary now says senior buyer changed from an A10 to an A13.
So the things that I'm used to looking at from federal experience are level of responsibility in KSAs. I can see that the KSA requirements for the 13 go to high school to with college desirable.
And the certifications
but
too.
But now
yeah.
to actually having a degree in from a business kind of school and so forth, and the knowledge, skills, and abilities. I'm trying to prize out the level of independent operation. The words that I liked that, Brian, you used the last time are, somebody that you can turn, feel comfortable turning jobs over to sort of a level of independence and the succession kind of planning that someone who could conceivably move up and take your place should you get that job in the new Biden administration and leave us. So is that pretty much, doesn't seem like in our job descriptions we have a specific thing that talks directly about level of responsibility. It's sort of implied in the job functions.
It is in terms of what, for example, for the senior buyer conducting pre-bid meetings and bid openings. I can't impart upon you a whole body of work here,
Can't
but
make me an HR
trust me
professional.
that those are the kinds of elements you look for. You look for complexity in terms of independence in doing work that has an impact, a significant impact on the outcomes. And so if the position has got responsibility for work that is not routine in nature, that is, and you're going to start out entry level, journey level, and kind of a master level, even in the professions, if those experiences are not working with the more complex bids where you've got many different elements associated with that, where you've got individuals who've really got to know the department's expectations in that, where they're going to have to kind of create the sources for finding reasonable bidders, and to make sure that the greatest emphasis, I would think, Brian, is on the bid specifications themselves and the detail in it, and whether it includes evaluative information when it's services, so that you can attract bidders that are responsible and capable of meeting the service requirements that you're trying to meet. And there's a lot of there's complexity in the elements of putting a bid together, including the creation of the specification.
Yeah, regardless of the potential succession planning, I need somebody that can do what I do,
Right.
And back me up day to day. Currently, we only have one other person in the office, and she's production. She's, processing purchase orders, change orders, expediting orders, following up, documentation, all the things that go along with, the purchasing procurement process.
Right.
So I need somebody that can also do the daily put an RFP together, conduct the meetings, get all the documentation, help with the agreements, do some negotiations, all the things that go along with that, as well as back up Valessa in her efforts during further production.
Mr. Lyle? Mr. City Attorney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to add some context to this. We did review the position. We did not provide a written response, but we did opine, communicating after research, that the position is really one of a procurement official, subsidiary to Brian here. And one of the things that makes it different than any of the other positions is that the city imposes upon a procurement official a certain level of independence from the city council, as we've talked about between executive functions and procurement. The courts have been particularly loath to allow procurements to proceed without that level of disconnection from the actual legislators who put and repose in those kinds of officials that kind of authority. The ability to decide independently that a procurement is appropriate, that there's been no bias. And so this position is almost the same as a procurement official at the highest level in this office, whereas the buyers would not be able to make certain determinations about what is an appropriate sole source, for instance, whether or not there's been bias or some imperfection in the procurement process, and then hold folks accountable. So this is what's being proposed for this particular position. And what we found was that the position as described at the pay that was suggested is legally sufficient and appropriate and adequately represents the complex level of work without the overall supervisory necessary, as in the top person that's already in the position, already in the agency now.
So I think there's a lot of food for thought and a lot of future discussions there on this whole discussion of executive versus non-executive. But I guess what I was missing the last time, I think we're filling it in, is independence can be independent of pay level. I mean, an A10 can be just as independent as an A13. So I'm trying to figure out how we would translate that level of independence from presumably interference from a political side. We would translate that into grade level.
Yeah, well, what we found in our research is that at certain levels, lower levels, there is not a concomitant position at federal, state, or other in private industry. The lower you get, the more removed that person is from the kind of independent judgment and decision making that's left for the highest procurement officials. The city's already designed its program. Right. And so in order to fit a new position with this title, with these responsibilities in a program you have already approved is appropriate. To do something different would be, in my view, a review of our whole procurement system, because we would not have the kinds of officials present, save for one, that could do the kind of officiating of procurements low to high. In this particular position, they're asking for a person right below the highest position. And we thought it was legally sufficient and appropriate to do so. And the pay grade made sense from the perspective of the kind of responsibility this particular procurement official has, as opposed to a buyer is not necessarily a procurement official.
So the pay grade, for example, in this case, specific set of college degrees as a prerequisite, and the experience, which also adds to pay grade, would indicate a level of moxie on the part of the employee that would allow them to be sensitive to the fact that they might be getting influence from another sphere. Is that kind of the algorithm we have going here?
Well, if in my experience with at the federal level is similar to yours, and that's kind of what happens. I mean, you create a level of education, background, skill, and ability that imparts to the public that this person is a procurement official representing the government and can make certain decisions independently of all around them. And it keeps conflicts down. It ensures that the procurement is is full and open, that it's fair, and that's what you're looking for at the highest level with respect to procurement, because a lot of the procurements at the higher level will include higher dollar amounts, will include maybe multiple bidders who are very well educated, maybe well lawyered, and you want to make sure that that person has the requisite experience. Now, once you add the experience, education, and background, you then have to adjust pay appropriately. And in a market like ours, it's pretty appropriate to adjust pay to satisfy the requirement for higher education.
Alderwoman.
I think it might be helpful, and I hate to ask for something different, something new, if we had the org chart, or if you could direct us to the org chart. I know, but I think it speaks volumes for what's needed. We have sat here for years and talked about the need to give Mr. Snyder support and backup. I think that's what we're talking about today. So whatever the job description is that's needed, I think we have to trust our professional staff to tell us what it should be. I read through it. I was a little, not moved, but surprised to see the physical conditions that were required. You have to lift 10 pounds and move stuff and all that kind of stuff.
That's language from Evergreen. That's now our standard
Oh, really?
descriptive style.
So
Yeah.
every job has to have that in it?
Every
Yeah.
job has physical and mental.
Man, I'd be in trouble if I had to do with the kind of stuff
You
they're
and me
saying.
both.
Today, but not,
Well, yeah, okay, not 20 years ago, maybe.
but yeah, that's pretty standard at the federal level too. that
Okay.
there's a
Yeah,
minimum.
in post Americans with Disabilities Act, that's kind of how a lot of jurisdictions have responded to being sure that you're attaching
okay,
those
I
requirements.
understand.
So it's not confusing, and you don't appear to not be pre-publicizing what's required for the position, so individual applicants can see what's needed and can apply accordingly. It's not hidden. It's not brought about later, appearing to be contrived.
Okay, learn something every day.
Yeah.
The salary. You've already tried to fill this position.
Yeah.
Am I correct? Without any luck. And I suspect that that's in part because of the salary that's attached to it, the original salary.
Yes.
So this new salary, 13, we're moving to, does that make us competitive with surrounding jurisdictions?
We'll find out.
Well, taking into account the fact that our positions are 35 hours versus 40, and then comparing with other jurisdictions, they're described all over the map in other jurisdictions. So I want you to know that I made sure I understood kind of the hierarchy within those departments. Comparing a 3-person unit to a county that's, I don't know, 12, 15 people, you need to make sure you understand what the assignment levels are for the different layers within those jurisdictions. So, for example, in Alexandria, City of Alexandria, they're described as contract specialists. So not only do I just look for buyers, I got to now figure out what that jurisdiction's got in their hierarchy. So you have to do that through surveying. In Anne Arundel County, they have an assistant purchasing agent, but they also have buyer 1, 2, 3, and 4, in their strata. So you got to try to determine if our senior buyer is more like the highest level buyer or more like the assistant purchasing agent in those comparisons. So sometimes your evaluation has to be a bit qualitative, just making comparisons for the sake of how, back to the org chart, how we are structured versus how other organizations are structured. And then it's not just volume of work, but there may be greater complexity in those jurisdictions because of what services they provide versus what the city may provide. And so, City of Rockville, their principal buyer, that you have to make sure you've identified who's the highest level purchasing agent or procurement officer, what's the title of that position to see the relationship there. Because you could look at principal buyer as maybe that's equivalent to the procurement officer. So all of that kind of evaluative effort goes into choosing the right positions. And
So I guess my question
I am
is,
not overselling this position at all. in
yeah,
terms of
well, is it
evaluative
high
job.
enough is what I was getting to.
Well,
Does it really make us competitive? And I hear Jody chiming in over
Well,
here.
we hope it is going to be competitive enough to draw in the person that we're looking for to fill that mid-level position. And based on the evaluation with all these other jurisdictions, she's saying, I think it's here, and we'll see. I mean, if we have a problem again, I hope we don't have
I
to.
mean, there are so many other factors that go into recruitment, you know, and this day and age with whatever you want to call it, the gray tsunami or whatever, you have a lot of, if you want to attract what we need, which is a fully capable professional, we'll hope that our timing and our search efforts will result in qualified people who also be willing to take the salary level that we have to offer. And we're not going to know that until we really get out there with it, quite honestly. That's just how it works. Recruitment for police officers, recruitment for other positions, it's you know, some of it's what the market has to offer us, not necessarily what we have to offer from a market value.
So you may have to come back to us if this is not sufficient. Hopefully not, but, you know, you may have to come back to say the salary is still too low for us to get the position filled adequately.
I'm
I
hoping
noticed
with our upcoming COLA as well, and the fact that the city has a very nice advancement structure with the percentage between steps and our benefit plans, all of that combined, and being a great place to work is a good part of the attraction, and that will be successful.
Well, and I noticed that, you know, I've heard bachelor's degree is now required, but there's also a certification, certified professional public buyer certification that's going to be required. So it's not just a bachelor's, but it goes beyond that to the appropriate certification.
Well, and quite frankly, that, you know, what has grown up in the professional world is there are many professions, and people that are in those professions know and understand that those credentials are necessary in order to
Thank you, sweetie.
in order to credential the work in the greater world. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm good with
Alderman Page?
the explanation and would think we should move forward with it.
Mr. Chair, I haven't had any questions because, of course, I was here when we went over this before, and I've done a little bit of research since we last met, and I'm satisfied that I'm ready to vote.
All right, thank you. So let me just make a couple of comments. First of all, thank you for the extra information. That it was very helpful. These hearings and the role of the council do have a purpose, which is we're laying down the predicate, the basis for explaining to our constituents how we're spending their money. And so I do think that we should, and in this case I believe we have demonstrated, that we take that responsibility seriously. I think when we vote favorably towards this, we will have indicated that we are supporting this change. I agree with Alderwoman Finlayson, it may not be enough, and we won't know until we try. So that's one thing. I think there are some broader issues that we really need to get back to related to HR and also the role of the council. And that harkens back to our 5209, which was the whole rewriting of the HR manual and those things. We had another attempt to do that.
2015 is when we were last present with that.
I know. So there's been those two. We never have finished the dialogue on the Evergreen study. I think those are very important. I realize that I'm affected or influenced by my federal experience, but I do like the idea of career ladders. I could be very comfortable with seeing this be a career ladder that has a 13 to 15 range or something like that, something that would fit underneath Brian's position. And I think that that could make things more efficient in the sense of we put out the advertisement and the person we really liked qualified for an A14. So we picked that person. The A13 would have been okay. The A15, we didn't think they were worth it. But it gives us much more flexibility, I think, and efficiency in doing that kind of thing. But that's for another time. Brian wants to get this position filled, and I understand that. So, but I do think that we really should be having, and this is the Charter Commission year coming up. This is the time for the city to look inward and look at how it's doing things and think about improvements. We do it every 10 years. It comes out. It's a great volume. I like it very much, and it sits on a shelf. Someone was asking me about it, and I said, I don't think you need to do a new one. Just go get the last two. They're pretty good. And dust them off, and let's do it this time. But in any event, those are gratuitous asides.
Do
Yes.
you mind if I go back to your statement about examining the HR function and the council role and the like? I met with the Civil Service Board on Monday, and of course, one of their expressed concerns is what is their role supposed to be? They thought they were fulfilling their role by reviewing positions, by my human resources manager coming before them, other professionals from the city coming to evaluate the positions and take the information provided, just as we've now done in detail with you today. So they would like to know what your questions are for them relative to their role, so that they can make sure that they understand what scrutiny you feel you need to do relative to their work. And if you have any questions, I meet with them again on the 16th. Be happy to take them back. They would.
I think that's a very good question, and it's underlying what I'm saying is that I think from time to time we should come back and review what we're doing. The one thing I do know is I don't think there's any angry taxpayer that is going to look up the Civil Service Commission. They're going to look up the 9 elected, and they're going to want to ask, are you being proper stewards of how we're spending the money? So I think that is our role here. That is our role on the Finance Committee specifically, is to look at those sorts of things. The expectation is what we said after the last meeting, is that we need to go to our other colleagues on the council and say, we looked under the hood, we asked questions that we thought you would have as well as we had, and we got answers. And we're certifying to you by our recommendation that we think you should vote for this legislation. So I think they're two different roles, but I think that there is definitely a role for the electeds in the process. In the charter, we are the board of directors. We are the elected, are the 9 policymakers, and the only policymakers called for in the code. And I think this is part of our role, but I think it has become ambiguous, and I'm very pleased with the new level of energy and the kinds of things that I'm seeing out of the Office of Law, and I think this is the very time to get back and ask ourselves those first principle kinds of questions. Where do you go? Where do you not go? The whole Julie Stankovic rule, all of those kinds of things that deal with the relationship between the electeds and the staff. And so I think there's a role, and I think we can define them. And I'm not sure it's terribly ambiguous, but I think you're asking the right questions, and I think the Civil Service Board is asking the right question.
Well, and with all due respect, what I'm trying to clarify is that they went through exactly what I described to you and received that information from Human Resources and from the departmental representatives, that the questions they're asking are, really more of what do you need to know from them that they did due diligence in their roles. so that what's brought before you, has already been through the Civil
I
Service
have
Board.
an answer for that, but Mr. Paone has been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In summing things up, for me at least, I would note that there's several things that, as a finance committee, we have to look at here, in my opinion, not the least of which is that we are about to pay $2 to $3 million more to have a public works center built. Originally, we were just about ready to put the shovel in the ground 2.5, 3 years ago. The price for that project has gone up approximately 25%. Part of it is due to purchase of land, but part of it is due to construction costs. We have a pool that we're paying not $3.2 million for, but we're paying perhaps in excess of $5 million for. We have some tough decisions to make. I'm a little surprised that nobody has thought to possibly compromise this from an A13 to an A12 or 11. I understand that the level is higher than what we're paying now to buyers that work in the office, and I have no problem acknowledging that in terms of pay level, but we don't know if an A11 or an A12 would work. We don't know if A13 will work. I would suggest we make it I'll say an A12, and if we need to make it higher, then we come back like we do for other positions and reclassify. I think we've got tough decisions to make starting when we get a copy of the budget. I think we're all conscious of the fact that the budget has gone up over a third in the last 2.5 years. This doesn't help. And this is a gift that keeps on giving financially because it's not an A13 for this year's budget. It's an A13 in all likelihood, forever and ever, as long as the position is in existence. As a matter of fact, it is likely only to go up, not to go down. I'm all for people that work for the city getting paid as much as they can. I mean, heck, I was a government employee, albeit pretty independent as a prosecutor, but I was a county employee. I know what it's like to work for government and to get a raise, or worse yet, not to get a raise. But I can't really support this in its present form. I think it's too big a jump to make, and it's a tough decision. I mean, I'd like to make it because I want to get the best person we can, but we also have to take into account, well, to some extent, regrettably, the cost of the position much more than we would at perhaps another time. I just think it's too much of a jump at one time. Thank you.
I'd like to point out that the position's been vacant since May 1st last year. By the time we fill the position, it'll probably be an entire year or longer. That savings in cost, salary, and benefits will be over $100,000. So it's kind of ridiculous for you to talk about, budget issue on something that is already being paid for many times over.
You were doing real fine until you said the Alderman was kind of ridiculous. I don't think that's appropriate, but my response would be, I'm looking right now at what we got the last time from the civil service, and that is clearly not enough, and that's what we said. It's not enough information. That's why we sent it back. I'm happy with what we got back in return.
Okay.
I also am happy to rely on both of your professional judgment, and I think you made a very good case. You talked about how you looked around at other jurisdictions. You picked what you thought was not overselling, your own words, the position, but would give us a reasonable chance to get Mr. Snyder the relief that he needs. I would point out, we're getting ready to go into potentially a heavy procurement period of time, with the garage, with the nuisance flooding, with the city dock, and with the new public works facility. There's a lot of
Yeah.
work that is right
On the
down the
forefront,
road.
yeah.
So we can't dally, but that's how I would respond. I don't see myself as supplanting or second guessing your professional judgment, but I do see myself as having a role to ask for a more full explanation of how you came to it, because I need to carry that message to the people who ask me, and on a fairly regular basis ask me, that's more than my property tax that you're giving to that one position. I need to be able to give them a reassurance, really, is what I want to be able to give them, that we're doing things responsibly. We have work we need to get done. It's being done on their behalf. They're the ones that benefit when we make these improvements in our infrastructure and so forth. So I feel that we've gotten to a right place for me, and I'm comfortable moving forward. I hope we don't have to come back and raise it to a 14 or a 15 to get it filled. I think we do need to get it filled, but Alderman, please.
Well, first of all, going back to Ms. Hopkins' comment from the Civil Service Board, I happened to run into, I think, maybe the newest member of the Civil Service Commission in rehab last week.
Oh, Roberto Veloso.
didn't-
He's also the chair.
He's also the chair.
Correct.
I didn't know him. He recognized me and came over and introduced himself and said how willing he is to work with us, and told my therapist to take good care of me because he needed me back. So I was pleased about that. But anyway, it was very obvious that they're eager to work with us and to help us. And I did tell him that I thought there was legislation that we would want them to weigh in on. At the time, I couldn't recall what it was. But, I know they're eager. And as Alderman Payon or Alderman Arnett said, what they sent us was what we needed the second time around. And so maybe now they know the level of detail that we'd like to see, so we can have a clear understanding. Not that we don't trust them to just say, yes, go do it, but we just need to be able to explain it a little bit further, a lot further than that. I have to address Alderman Payon's comments about the budget and our expenditures. The Public Works facility should have been built 3 years ago. You're absolutely right. And it is not our employees who held that up.
Yeah.
We held that up. The alderman held that up. So we are to blame.
Mayor's had a little-
And the mayor, right. Well, he's part of the council.
Couple of mayors.
So it is totally unfair to hold our employees accountable for actions that we take. And Mr. Snyder has been doing his job and another job for how many years now? And have we ever talked about compensating him for all that he is doing? I don't think so. So I just think it's not appropriate for us to lay our shortfalls on the backs of our employees. Not going to let that happen, I'm sorry, because it's not appropriate. I'm going to make a motion that we support R720, and I'm done.
Is there a second?
Not for me.
All right, I will second that motion.
Thank you.
Is there any further debate? By the way.
Yes.
All right, I think this is a healthy debate. I know we've taken a lot of time, and we have some people with some deadlines that have to be out of here no later than noon. I'm one of those. But I think this is a healthy discussion. I'm glad we've had it. Alderman Payon.
Thank you. I resent being called ridiculous because my point of view is a little different from Mr. Snyder's. He has a department to run. I've got a city to run. I'm not responsible for a delay in the construction of the Public Works facility. We had a mayor who came in and absolutely stopped it when it was about to go forward. Many of us resented it. It was not an alternative. We weren't presented with a viable alternative, but we're not here to talk about that today. I've got to answer to my constituents and to the citizens of this city entirely. This is a small thing in terms of a now $145 million budget, but I don't think that we've made appropriate, well, I don't think that it's a good idea to make the jump in pay as we propose to do here. We will have to make room in the budget for not just this, but for replacing the Hillman Garage. We've got the city dock project. These are all things that we as a council have to take into account. You don't necessarily, but we do. There's not an unlimited source of money, and we need to start somewhere. I don't think I'm punishing any employee by any means. Apparently, the person who's going to take this job isn't even an employee yet. Nobody values the work of city employees more than I do, but there's also a limit to what taxpayers can afford to pay. And I simply was stating that I thought we should make an effort to come in a little lower than we are, and I think it's a very defensible position, and I think that it's a very reasonable one to take. I don't sit here and say a proposal you make is ridiculous, and I resent that you would say that about a position that I happen to take. Thank you.
So I will apologize for using the word ridiculous. However, I've been out without a person for 10, 11 months. It's very stressful. Both Les and I both had to convert 2 weeks of vacation last year because we couldn't take off. We got plenty of work to do. We're trying to get it done. And we need the help. And, you know, if 13 will get the person we need, then I believe you should support that.
As do I. I think we've probably belabored this quite enough. I think we're,
Would you like me to call the question?
no, I was going to ask for a vote on your recommendation that we recommend favorably this legislation to the council. All those who in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No. All right, thank you. The motion, or the recommendation will go forward to the council. Brian, we're not being cavalier. We understand the pressure you're under and appreciate it. And also we appreciate the coming workload. So we are dealing with things, as Alderman Payon said, that are our level of frustration, but that doesn't mean we're not mindful of your level of frustration. So thank you for what you do.
It is, I was asking Ms. Green if this is on the agenda for Monday for approval.
I don't know. I don't.
It
didn't
should
bring
be.
that with me, but
Probably should
probably
be.
will be. Yeah.
Okay,
All right. All right.
We certainly hope so.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah, we want to move that along.
thank
All
you.
right. Hopefully, the next items will be much quicker. So next item is Resolution 1320, Sailing Vessel Maiden Dock Fee Waiver. The Maiden is, we were told at the last council meeting, and I actually had happened to watch the movie, The Maiden, a couple of nights before, is about an all-woman crew that was in the Volvo Around the World race. And of course, I was excited because I'm a sailor and have done ocean sailing, but it was really a good story. And this is the boat that is coming, making a repeat tour around the world, and they're coming here to Annapolis, and they want to be at our dock, and they're here to generate money to help sponsor their retour around the world, and they're asking us to waive the fees for that. You know that I, along with Alderman Payon, are not one of the fans for waiving fees, but one of the weaknesses that I have is for waiving fees for tall ships that come and grace our harbor and remind us of our maritime history and heritage. And so that's what this legislation is about. There's a fiscal impact fee. It's a couple of $1,000s in that range. Right, so,
So, Mr. Chair, I will move, it's 2 weekends or 2 weeks that they're here, April 8th through 12th and April 17th through 18th, for a total of $2,131.50.
That's
So
correct.
I'll move approval of R13.
Okay, discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of recommending?
Did I get a second?
Oh, second,
Second.
sorry. All those in favor of recommending approval to the council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Next item is our 1420 tug of war. This is actually a bill for money that was, that came up in 2018, right? 2019. Oh, is this the 2019, so we're forgiving the 2018?
The event took place November of 2018. That was
Right.
within our fiscal year 19.
So the background here is the tug of war is a charity event. Everything that they do that is not part of their expenses goes to various charitable organizations. They gave away all their money from the 2018 event, and this bill came in very late. I am proposing that we waive that. They don't have the money to pay this 2018 bill. They do have a bill for 2019. I was also asked to waive that, but I didn't. But 2018, it just seems to me that's too far beyond the pale. We should do a better job of billing people promptly so that they can account for it in their operations. So that's the nature of this legislation in my view.
Mr. Chair, do they not know the cost prior to the event?
No, because they have vendors and various kinds of people, bills, they have a general notion. And typically their costs are, I think it's about 35% of the money they take in that they have to pay for the various things. You've been there, you've been on Second Street pulling for the
That's
eastward
right.
side.
That's
Yes.
right. Well, I'm asking because I would expect the harbor master to be able to give them a cost prior to the event, as opposed to 3 months after the event.
What happened to the winners go to the winners go the spoils?
Hey,
We won that year.
you did. It was one of those rare occasions. We let our guard down. Well,
I can provide a little bit more background on this one. They didn't get the bill 3 months after the event. This is November of 2018.
Okay.
They got this bill when we billed for the 19, the most recent event, because when we went back to look, we had only waived the fees for the previous year. We had only waived the parking fees, not the harbor master fees. So we sent that on the bill with it. So they were a little caught off guard with the old fees. It was a year past when the event had occurred.
So they had paid the parking fees.
No, we waived,
Oh,
the
we
council
waived.
had waived the parking fees, and I think they had anticipated that all the fees were waived. But then when going through the process for billing for the most recent event, we realized we had not collected the harbor master fees for the year before and put that on the bill, and they were not expecting it.
so this takes us to the more general dialogue. It's the same kind of dialogue we could have had in discussing the waiver of the fees for the Maiden. We waived the fees recently. I think we have more in waiving fees for the Pride. And it all has to do with, in my mind, the trade-off between, because when these organizations don't pay for it, the taxpayers do pay for it. The taxpayers paid for that bill for the harbor master. And things like the tug, the lights parade, these tall ships are all part of the branding of Annapolis. The argument, although I'm not sure we've ever really gone to the exercise of doing the calculus to see how much revenue it brings into our businesses, which translates into increase in the amount of property tax and those sorts of things, but it clearly contributes to the ambiance of the city of Annapolis, the zeitgeist of living here as opposed to living in Arnold, for example, not to besmirch Arnold, but these are exciting parts. They're part of the reason why people enjoy living here, and they can partake of it or not partake of it. We've got the St. Patrick's Day parade coming up. That's another part of living in Annapolis, the parades themselves and St. Patrick's Day, and you can partake of it or not partake of it to the extent that these exercises have a charitable function. Way back the last time we dealt with the special events in these waivers, we felt that charitable events took precedent over events like, say, a racing event, a marathon event, or that sort of thing. So we always gave them precedent. I don't think until Teresa Sutherland showed us that we on the council fully had an idea of the number and amounts of dollars that were being waived, many of those things without our understanding, and I've always felt that we need to go through an exercise once again of reevaluating what we're doing, and I think going out to our constituents, and I have tested this with my constituents in my town hall meetings, and there is a mixed attitude towards it, but I would say overwhelmingly the majority is this is a part of Annapolis, this comes with the turf. In terms of the impact on our tax assessment, this is a minor aspect of it. This one, they just don't have the money because they dispersed all of those fees before they got the bill. They do have the 19 bill, and they are going to be paying that, is my understanding, although I'm not part of that whole decision-making process. So,
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve R 1420.
Second.
any further discussion? Mr. Gerald?
Yeah, I would just add to what Alderman Arnett was saying. You know, these are difficult issues to come into the staff and decide which ones move forward, which ones shouldn't. We feel like it's probably a council decision. Maybe we need to have a better framework where we can approve some of these or not, because it's best that we do it at that level, I think, rather than all these coming to you and you having to say no, which is never an easy thing. But, you know, we've got more coming forward. We've got the Annapolis Film Festival coming forward because they've asked for us to waive fees. That's coming back again. And it's just hard to say which ones of these should come forward and which ones shouldn't. Right. You know, it's such a gray area, and so many of them are good causes that we would like to support, but yet, you know, we have these fees in place for a certain reason. Why some people have to pay and others don't have to pay is always a difficult thing to work out. So,
well, thank you for that, and I think you're right. And besides which, Alderman Payon and I specialize in gray.
You know, we had a committee when we were dealing with special events.
Yes, we did.
Who recommended to us what events should be major events and minor events and whatever else they came up with. Maybe we need some sort of a group to get together to, I don't know how we could evaluate all the fees that are requested of us, because we can get them all the time and who knows what's coming, but maybe to outline some standards by which to measure those events. You know, if it's an event, for example, that is a nonprofit event that's going to be contributing all of its money back to our nonprofits, as opposed to a revenue generating event for private purposes. I don't know, but maybe there should be some discussion to try to give us some rules by which to follow.
Well, we would be happy to take a stab at that and come back to the Finance Committee to have that discussion and, you know, just have a draft and see what that might look like, just a framework where we can make these decisions more easily, other than just saying, well, they seem good and they don't seem good, and, you know, something like that.
And it's a pretty complex, that was actually, Sharon Kennedy headed up that committee, and it was actually driven by downtown businesses who felt that they were being overwhelmed by events every weekend. in their prime visitor time, and a lot of the events were racing events that, cycling or racing, foot races that closed off streets. It was also having an impact on Sunday services, so it was a pretty complex issue, and they did an incredible effort. I remember the multicolored spreadsheet, and then we passed legislation. We revisited it again, I think, at the beginning of the Panelides administration with Felicia, and I think we've sort of, because she's been doing such a good job, we've sort of said, hey, we don't have to worry about it. But I think it probably is a good time, City Manager Gerald, to take another look at it. And I'm not sure how much we really have to do, but I think probably always is a good idea to review our procedures from time to time.
So there's a motion on the floor, Mr.
Yes.
Chair.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Next item, we have two new items, SA 27-20, which is for planning and zoning, and it's, I believe, recognizing monies that were not recognized in the budget appropriation.
Yes, the SA 2720 is the request for additional appropriations to spend a contribution that we received from a developer in order to do a traffic study for the related development. It's $1,896.
Are there any questions or discussion?
I'm not clear. Where does this $1,800 come from?
A developer who has got a proposed development, it's out by the Park Place,
So he made the contribution so that we can pay for the study.
right, to help pay for the traffic study. So we need to increase the spending authority to spend this amount.
Okay.
All right. Is there a motion?
Looks good. Mr. Chair, I move recommendation of SA 2720.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. Next is SA 2820, which is why Ricky has been here waiting. And this one's a nice big one. It's $160,700. And please tell us what this is about.
I'll give you a quick brief explanation. SA 2820 is for $160,700. What this money is going to be used for, we're going to increase the appropriations in the FAST fund, the Forfeit Asset and Seizure Fund, so that we can help pay for some of the upfitting and the laptops that are occurring on the new vehicles we have. We have an equipment loan with Bank of America to pay for most of this, but it's not going to cover everything. And we can use these seized funds for that purpose. And so, I don't know if you got, there is a schedule that we attached, but I think you may have only got you got the schedule, so that shows you where the differences are, and then Ricky can talk to you about the details of what they're buying.
Okay. Questions from the committee?
I have a question. Officer Truitt, how much do we collect in our asset and forfeiture, whatever that account is? Forfeiture and asset seizure?
It's a variable account. It's a rolling account. It includes funds seized as a part of task force from the federal level, and then also state seizures. And it's a rolling account. We may make a seizure in this fiscal year, and it may take up to 10 to 12 years for the funds to actually become available. And so normally
Years, did you say?
It could take up to 10 years for it to become available to us. So it has to hit the litigation level at the federal level. The case has to be adjudicated, and then the forfeiture proceedings begin. We get notice of those as soon as the seizure happens from our federal authority partners. And so we balance anywhere from $300,000 to $450,000 in that account. And we use a portion of that every year to pay for related expenses to do with drug work and equipment and things like that we may need. And so in the past, it's been used when we have a shortfall such as this to get equipment for our officers and to get that out there as soon as possible.
So are we not able to use the cars until this equipment is installed?
Correct. We will need the equipment to be installed for the cars to go out, yes.
Okay. Okay. Are you ready for a motion, or is there
I
further?
am.
I'd move approval.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor of recommending on this, signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. Thank you for waiting through. Thank you for being here. All right. The next two items are items that I have asked that we put on the agenda on a regular basis. It struck me that I've been remiss in reporting to you my participation and observations from two pretty important functions. One is the Financial Advisory Commission meeting, and the other is the Police and Fire Retirement Commission. I can report quickly on the latter. Until last week, we were doing pretty good, certainly relative to the rest of the country. We were doing very well in terms of our level of funding for the police and fire retirement plan. I believe we were 84% funded. It was in the mid 80s, which is not as high as we would like it to be. It's not what we've committed to our public safety officers, but we're very much better off than most of the country, anyone else in the state for that matter. We have needed to pay more attention to the kinds of investments we make, because we have an actuarial goal of getting a 7.5% return on our investment. And other than 19, which was a fabulous year, that's been hard to achieve. 20, we'll see how it's going to go. So I think that the policy consideration that the Finance Committee and the council members should be aware of is that the commission, the board, has been exploring more and more investments in equities and in private financing and other kinds of things which bring with them a high risk and reward factor. So far, we've done, last year, as I said, 19 was incredibly good across all of our investments. Even our financial instruments did around 4%. We're not always going to have a year like last year, so we always have to be continually protecting the safety of the investments while trying to achieve the return. So it's been, I know you sat on this many years ago in a better, well, actually in a worse finance, were you on in 2008? So you were in a very bad period.
Well, we started in a good place.
Yes.
And ended up
Yeah, we were 126%
That's right.
funded. And then we made some unwise decisions in terms of the city not making its annual contributions, and none of the contributions were high enough to sustain. And those,
Thank you for not using the term ridiculous.
you're welcome.
Get over it, Fred. It's okay.
The amount we were contributing wasn't high enough. I think we made huge strides when we did the interest-based bargaining, IBB. The city made a big increase in its contributions, but the rank and file made a big increase also. I'm never comfortable. I always want to be at 100%, but I would say I would be less than honest that right now I think we're in pretty good shape. We need to continue to work on it, but I feel like we're being reasonable. We're being true to our commitment to our public safety people, and we'll just keep working on that.
Well, I guess my question is whether the mayor has an interest in increasing city contributions. You know, we're supposed to be increasing
We are.
each year.
So
where are we with-
we make the actuarially required, the actuarial recommended contribution now every year. And the actuary determines that based on a lot of assumptions that we make about future mortality, pay raises, that kind of thing. So each year, we contribute based on a percent of payroll. So that percent of payroll has been climbing the last couple of years. A couple of years ago, we had to do 18%, then it was 20, now it's 20, it was 22 for this year. And we've just, we have a completed actuarial study that told us that we weren't using the correct assumptions in many cases, so it's going to climb quite a bit for your next budget. And we got to get up to the, people are living longer. Our pay raises were higher than what they had used on their projections. And there were a couple other assumptions that changed as well. And that's making our contribution rate's going to be significantly higher. So
Good
But
to
that
hear.
was
that's a
one
warning.
of the fiscal
Good to hear.
policy changes made by Teresa Sutherland, City Manager Sutherland, when she came in along with Jody. I personally feel comfortable looking our public safety officers in the eye and feel that we're doing right by them. Doesn't mean that we can let down our guard.
That's right, that's why I'm asking.
But I think we have new policies in place that are much better, much healthier, very prescriptive rather than sort of, I think this year we'll do such and such kind of thing. So I think we're in a much better place. Any other questions on that? And we can get you, we have a new advisor, Ampersand Plus, that we've had now for, I guess, going on 2 years now. Very impressed with Ian Smith, who's the, Smith, right? Jones. Well, Smith Jones. Ian Jones. And he really talks to us in a way that I can
He
understand.
dumbs it down for you, huh?
He did. So I think he's very, very reliable, and I'm happy with the new way that we're going on that. So on the report, I gave you a written hard copy of reports from 2 of the Financial Advisory Commission meetings. The one I would recommend to you is the one from January 13th, because that's where we had Dan Nees and Joanna Trow come and present to us in some detail. I tried to sketch in my notes the kinds of things that I heard them say. There is a lot of work that has been done by the administration with those 2 in looking at city projects, 120 of them. There's been some priorities given to them. My angst is that I think we need to have a role in priorities. That certainly comes to us when we get the budget. But I do think that it would be helpful for there to be a work session where we get caught up more on the kinds of things that they're doing for us. We're embarking on the Hillman Garage rebuild, the city dock revitalization, and the continual planning for nuisance flooding, as well as in the background sea level rise. And a lot of the things that they're doing are the underpinnings for this resiliency financial authority. We have legislation at the state level that is setting up the ability for us to have such an authority, either independently as a municipality or jointly with the county, which frankly the latter is my preference. But and I think that we are going to be seeing soon, on the 18th of this month, the RFPs are in. Sorry, Director Gerald had to leave us, but I've expressed that I'd really like the council to be involved in reviewing what the outcome of the RFP is. The RFP is multifaceted, has to do with Hillman, but also planning for City Dock. And we're talking about a big amount of money. And these are things that I think we're going to need to be kept up to speed on abreast of. So I can...
May I ask, when does the committee that's been created go back to the Finance Advisory Commission to answer their questions. Because I'm looking at the report that's here, and there's a number of questions. The last one being, how is this playing into the CIP this year?
And they expect, that was asked by the committee of the administration, and they're expecting an answer for that at their next meeting, which I don't remember. Do you remember, Jody, when that's scheduled, the next FAC meeting?
Isn't
it's
the mayor's
coming up.
budget including the CIP?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, and that's in a month.
yes.
The mayor's budget is due to the council the first meeting in April.
The mayor will give his budget to us in April, but it's his budget right now.
Right.
So I'm asking if the CIP portion of his budget will be inclusive of,
What's coming in these proposals that we're waiting for? Yes, it will. That will reflect what we're doing. I'm not sure what form it'll take because we haven't seen the proposals yet to know what they're going to look like. If it'll be any city funding at all, we don't know.
I want to put on the record my grave concern. Not about rebuilding Hillman, not about sea level rise efforts. I am concerned about transit. Transportation and transit, parking and transit have been joined at the hip from day one. And if we take that revenue away that has been used from parking to support transit, then we have no transit. That's my concern. So whatever comes out of all of this, I need a guarantee that there will be funding, and I mean a guarantee that there will be funding for transit.
So let me speak to that, but just the next FAC meeting is the 12th. They're at 7:30. I know your favorite hour.
Yes.
Over at Pip Moyer. I find them to be very rewarding meetings to attend. We've got some very good people on there, and the finance department does a very good job of supporting their efforts. My vague notion, and I think we need as a council to have a stronger notion, is that we are conceivably headed towards a public-private partnership on the Hillman Garage, where the private partner will get will design, build, manage the garage. We will get a ground rent, and that ground rent is eyeballed at $2 million. That would be the money that would be available for any purpose, but has been available for transit. That is slightly less, but in the ballpark of what we've been transferring.
I haven't read the RFP that went out. I don't know that it has any, you stipulated an amount of ground rent. I don't think we gave them any criteria to go on. We're asking them to give us their ideas on how we can make this work for everybody. So you said some kind of ground rent amount. I'm not sure that was in that document at all. We're trying not to box them into any of our restrictions and see what kind of ideas they can come up with.
But do they know what our needs are?
Okay, so I have not been personally involved in this process whatsoever. So that would be a question for city manager.
I have read and been following the RFP, and I was at the bidders conference. In the bidders conference, just as Jody said, they were told this is an open thing. We're looking for you to tell us what we can get and what we can do. But the concepts that has been discussed, both in public forum and in background, has been that we will conceivably surplus the Hillman Garage to them, and they will pay us a ground rent. And the ground rent number that I've heard discussed is somewhere in the order of $2 million. But that's all impacted by a lot of moving parts. There's a hope that we will not only get money out of this RFP for that, but that we will get money to help us revitalize City Dock. And so we have really three big moving parts. One is Hillman Garage rebuild, City Dock redo, and the ongoing efforts to manage nuisance flooding, which is critical to being able to use the downtown area. So this procurement, we have two big bidders, is supposed to come back with their ideas on how all of that can be put together. And that's fine, that's the process that we agreed to, have embarked on. But the question I asked City Manager Gerald a couple of days ago is, what if they come back to us and say, gee, all we can do is replace the garage of the larger size, about 40% bigger, because we're gonna have to go down, and there isn't gonna be any money left over. Does that change our attitude about whether we want to get into a public-private partnership, or whether we just want to rebuild the garage ourselves? And those are, the policy decisions that we need to make. Rebuilding the garage ourselves means we have to finance it. The finance director, Jody, told us, and we heard this at one of our briefings, is that we don't have enough money to finance the $25 million garage in our debt ceiling limit. However, the rating agency said that could be a legitimate excuse for exceeding our debt ceiling for this public purpose, and we wouldn't get necessarily donned on our rating. So we'll need to make a decision about the cost of financing, which is another cost to it, versus maintaining the ownership of the asset and having the financial flow out of that. It's always thrown off a positive amount of money, and it has been what's largely been used to subsidize the transit. So those are big, important policy decisions. The assurance I got from Director Gerald, and I wish he were here, and we'll need to ask him to give us that assurance, is that, of course, and I think I just saw something in writing to this effect too from the director, of course the council will be brought in at the appropriate time and briefed on and involved in the decisions that need to be made. We will have to be involved if we're turning the Hillman Garage over. We'll essentially have to do a surplus process like we would do with the Spa Road facility, which requires an ordinance and it requires a majority vote on the part of the council. So we will have to be involved in it at some point. Frankly, I think it's better to be involved as a partnership along the way. This is a pitch I made to the mayor. Monday is try us, you'll like us, we actually really want to be on the same team. And I know he's going to
What
Million
year
Miles.
how long have we been saying this?
Well, but he's got a big load on his agenda, and I said to him, you should have a Tuesday coffee with 3 other council members every week. And he said, why? I'm always available to you. And I said, no, you're not. You're so busy. And, he is very busy. The mayor is a big job. But I tried to say it's better for us not to get a last minute surprise and be brought along because we all do want positive outcomes for the city. And I think we largely share his vision, maybe not the specifics of it. And we're here to make that happen.
Alderman, all of what you said, you mentioned transit one time. And again, that needs to be
It has always been.
in the forefront as part of the discussion. I don't care what happens with that garage, whatever happens with parking out of that.
We want to make sure we have an answer for how to plug the hole
Absolutely.
if transit loses out on some of its revenue. And
right.
whatever form this comes to the council in, whether it's some kind of property transaction or a part of the CIP, that's the time when the council will be asking these questions. And I can't guarantee any outcome. You asked me to guarantee something,
Yeah,
but
I
I
know
will
you
tell you that I will be making sure that we've covered all financial aspects of this that I can think of, and how we're either losing revenue or increasing expenses, and how we're going to handle that balance.
Okay.
So you have always been the guardian angel for transit. I agree. I share.
Everybody doesn't have a car in the city.
That's right.
And we don't want everybody to have a car in the city, you know? We want to get people to be mobile with other things.
So there's some more general timing kinds of issues. I will want to have a discussion. I think the council should have a discussion with the city manager and whatever other resources. I feel uncomfortable going forward with a garage procurement until I really know what the status is of this resiliency financing authority and whether I know about the funding for the nuisance flooding, which last I knew, we still didn't have the FEMA money, and the plans for what's going to go on in City Dock and how much that's going to cost. So
You mean the 3 million, or was it 5 million from FEMA?
We have
3,
the 2, we're waiting for the 3 still.
right,
We're waiting for the additional 3,
right.
because they were waiting for us to change the documentation.
I don't know the status. I'm not sure what the status was on what they were filing and waiting for, but I know we still don't have the 3.
They were waiting for some documentation from us because the usage changed. So,
This is usually the time when we get an update from the finance director. Do you have, I'm late, but do you have a quick,
Most of my time, besides my regular daily duties that take up a lot of my time, we're working on budget. We're trying to pull the budget together. We're meeting with departments this week and trying to get our first draft pulled together, so.
okay?
No,
Yeah, I need to sign.
no audit committee report. Mr. Chairman, we will be meeting on March the 16th. We did not meet this past month by agreement of the committee.
Mr. Chair, do you have vacancies on the audit committee?
We do not at this time, but I anticipate having one shortly. And I would be most interested in names of anyone that you think might be appropriate.
Okay.
We do also have a vacancy on the Financial Advisory Commission. That body has been a very important, thoughtful body over the years, and if you have any notions about somebody for that, that would be helpful. I know Mr. Sussman is looking for someone to fill that position. Unfortunately, Joe Cater left us.
I remember seeing the resignation letter. Mr. Chair, the audit committee has not quite joined the pantheon of, shall we say, patrons when it comes to making contributions to the city budget yet, because we've taken so long, for a number of reasons, to kind of get out of the gates and get running. The legislation, I think, is wholly inadequate to do what we would like to do. And we had a city manager who was and at least one member of the committee who were sticklers for literally reading ordinances literally. I mean, that's one school of interpretation. I was not part of that, but it made it a little bit harder even still. We do have some work that we've accomplished, and we do, matter of fact, we've accomplished quite a bit, but not necessarily anything that will hit the lights of Broadway or anything like that. But we're working on it. It's been steady, slow, but steady progress, and things are picking up.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any other business before the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'd move that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, Mr. City Attorney, for being here. I really appreciate the level of effort you and your staff are giving us and the advice that you're giving us. So thanks.
Sir, and we set up a meeting with you tomorrow.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
Go over the legislation.
Yep.